Welcome to yet another monthly debate on matters in and by Rwanda here on CNBC Africa. I'm your host, George Ndarango. Today we take a look at the mining sector. But before I introduce the panel of guests we have today, an elite panel, let's have a bit of background. Rwanda's mining sector stands as one of the major contributors to the country's GDP, contributing $103 million just between January and August this year, averaging about $143 million per year for the last 7 years. Now this 103 is quite a solid number, but according to the government, this is not sufficient, and we'll find out why and how exactly this is not sufficient. The revenue target for 2015 was $209 million. Why do we have this deficit? We'll find that out as well. Joining us to break down these numbers, the sector's investment in modern technology, and a lot more, as I had mentioned earlier, is an elite panel. We have the Honorable State Minister in charge of mining, Evode Imena, on my immediate right. We have David Ben-Susan, CEO of Mineral Supplier Africa. Glad to have you here with us. And Leonidas Simpenzwe, Vice Chairman, Rwanda Mining Association, and Senior Geologist, Tinko Group. Glad to have you speaking to us as well. Now, let's get straight into it. We have a lot to tackle over the next 1 hour. We'll start with the Honorable Minister. Now, the last time we spoke, we were talking about things aligning within the ecosystem. But we mentioned at that particular time we had a lot of issues that the sector was facing. We had a drop in global commodities. Minerals was no exception. The ecosystem was aligning, modern investment on the same. You talked to us about the numbers being hit when the revenue target of 209 was hit by up to 50%. But as up to where we stand, how convinced are we that we can now fully rely on the mining sector to contribute either to pushing the numbers higher or to contribute more prominently to the GDP?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us and organizing this panel discussion. We are still confident that the mining sector has many more good years ahead. Although we are in a difficult period, it has been affecting us mostly due to the fluctuating prices. But now we started seeing a little bit of recovery on the tin side. We started seeing a little bit of growth on the gold side, but we still have challenges on prices, essentially on the tungsten, the wolfram, and the coltan. But we are also seeing some good developments around gemstones. So those are some good, interesting signals. However, we need to still build a good foundation that will be able to cope with these threats and be able to project and put in place mechanisms that will support our industry as we move forward. Right,
now we'll get into more on the policies and this entire framework, but we'll just move to you, David. The country which mainly strikes wolfram, cassiterite and coltan. Earlier on we had talked about the treaties, but now we continue to see a lot more being brought onto the portfolio that investors both locally and internationally can tap into. We are seeing to the tune of about 98,000 tons as of last year, but as of now, give us a sense of the reaction we are seeing or the involvement of people outside to all these minerals coming on board.
The problem is Rwanda is affected, Africa is affected too much by outside influences. For instance, the Dodd-Frank legislation, of which the miner or the downstream industry is responsible for 82% of the cost, which is huge, and interest rates. Interest rates in Africa and in Rwanda are huge. On dollars, you can pay between 8 and 10% interest rate at a time when interest rates are all-time lows in the rest of the world. So the mining industry, in addition to facing problems with the pricing, which we can't control, also faces problems with legislation being taken and made in Europe and America that affect us, and OECD implementing those legislations which affect the mining industry. Rwanda can't fight American legislation. We can't change it. They made a legislation which affected this region only, East Africa and the Congo. We were labelled conflict, full stop. And there's no end game. It's still there. And until that disappears, it's going to be very difficult for the mining industry to grow.
Right, we were just joking about it earlier regarding how we've seen a lot of conversations around our neighboring countries in regards to the minerals as well. It's nice to see that conversation continue to take shape. Now, infrastructure research, Leonidas, I'll come to you on my extreme right. Infrastructure research and traceability skills, traceability fees and skills were cited as the industry's major expenses. Now, from your end, within the Rwanda Mining Association, a lot of that has been tackled. But what do you feel is still the gap, even as we continue to build layer after layer on this conversation?
Thank you very much. I think that is a good question. The industry, as my colleague David has been saying, we are not controlling the prices. And the major issue, even if we try to develop the industry, we try to upgrade the mining, it's a bit difficult because the infrastructures in the mining sector, they are very expensive because we don't manufacture the mining tools. So we have to import all the tools, most of them now from China. We're talking about an underground mining. You have to import all the rails from China, all the mining cars from China. We have to import drilling machines from China. We have to import all the exploration equipment from either China or South Africa. And this involves a lot of amount of US dollars to import it. So,
but it's much cheaper to get them from outside.
It's not cheaper because we have to import it to pay in US dollars. Then we have to transport it from abroad, let's say from China to here. The distance is wrong. And then the time to take to buy the stuff from China, to bring them here. And then the time to develop the mine, you have to keep a stock, especially on explosives, it's not very easy. The traceability, it's another issue because we are not, the cost of traceability is very high. And it's only occurring on the Rwandan minerals, let's say Rwanda and Burundi and the DRC. And you cannot be competitive, even though the challenge one is because you have to import your mining equipment from far away from the country, and then you have to encourage 10% of your income on the traceability fees that other people do not carry on, and that is hampering the industry. Okay, thanks. Sir.
All right, thank you for that. And now it's been 4 years in the making ever since the Rwanda Mining Association came on board. But let's talk about steel dependence. On a national scale, I'll come back to you, Honorable Minister. We're still dependent on artisan mining, which has slowed down the output potential. Now, we intend to raise that number to about 20%, but I'm sure you'll touch on the modern technologies, but how exactly can we align both individuals along here on the panel, key industry leaders, to ensure that apart from artisan mining, we're still well on track to reach these targeted revenues?
Let me come back a little bit to what my friend Leonidas has just explained about the explosives.
Right.
This is one of the consumables we are using in the mining industry, and we have been evaluating that about $1.5 million is used just to buy explosives from outside, explosives used in mining and quarrying and other infrastructure projects. Now, what the government is trying to put in place is a national store of explosives, a well-developed and regulated national store. They will have the capacity to import on bulk quantities. So we believe it will reduce the costs at importation, but it also reduce the hurdles they are going through with the logistics, because today each company willing to import explosives does it itself. But if we allow them to put their marshals together through that national store, they will have a lot of gains through reduced price, and the national store will also provide the services. Now, coming back to the skills, we are glad to say that today we have 2 schools. There's the University of Rwanda, which has opened a faculty of geology and mining last year. And there's the IPRC, that's the Regional Polytechnic Center of Kigali, which has a mining school, and the first graduate went out last year. So those are 2 good developments, but they are not still enough. We had sent students abroad in various countries, and the first one are coming back. So all of those who are coming from abroad, from high grade universities, they will come and join those who are being trained locally, and the other ones who have been in the industry for many years, like David and Leonidas. They will learn from their experience, and all together will develop the mining industry, because what we are targeting at is modernization of the industry. We can't continue relying on artisanal mining, although artisanal mining is also linked to the nature of our geology. You know, some of our deposits are relatively small, so they are not too attractive to huge mechanization. But we believe that we can put in place well-organized, well-managed, small-scale mines. They will not be artisanal, they will not be very large, but they will be small but well-organized, well-planned. So in brief, that's the key thing we are targeting.
Right. Now, Honorable Minister mentioned about the deposits, relatively small, but with time we continue to see a lot of that coming together. There is a Rwandan gold belt that stretches over 180 kilometers from northeast to southwest, connecting two other mining districts around our country. Now, when someone sees something like that, from outside looking in, you automatically think we have a very robust production of gold, but that is not exactly the case, is it?
I'm not involved in gold, so I'm not the right person to answer. But gold requires large investment, again, and it requires people to have faith in Africa, not just Rwanda. The president of the last meeting talked about the East African community. Within the East African community, there are investors. Those investors can come to Rwanda and be encouraged. The gold can be developed. It's again, as the Honourable Minister was saying, they're small mines. They're not huge mines. They will produce, and they'll produce gold. And they are producing now, artisanally. But until you get investment, until there is a decent way of investing at a cost that is affordable, if you've got to borrow in Rwandese francs and you've got to cover an 18 or 20% cost of borrowing, how can you make a profit? It's impossible.
Right.
And again, I repeat, it's important. Why are we paying that sort of interest rate when outside in the world there are negative interest? In Japan, you pay to deposit your money in the bank. So why are we paying such high rates? What is going on? Who decides it? If I want to go to a bank and borrow $20 million, they will not be able to give me $20 million. 4 banks might come together and give me 5 each, but they want you to guarantee everything. So if you could guarantee the loan to that degree, you wouldn't need their money in the first place. So it's almost a chicken and egg situation. We need the money to come in to invest. The gold belt can be developed. It has the ability to be developed, but it requires funds, and the funds are not coming.
Before we go to you, Leonidas, let me just throw that back, because that's an interesting point. We have to talk about that. Now, 2 particular issues have been raised by David. Number one is regarding the investment going into that gold belt, and number 2, what exactly financiers are doing on the same. But apart from that, I'll just circle back to the question I asked. The misconception that people have when they see that there's gold here, this area, and they automatically anticipate a lot of volumes of tons of gold from that. But just speak to us about that particular misconception you've noted here in Rwanda.
Yes, there's a misconception, maybe depending from the availability of information.
Right.
You know, even if the mining sector is quite old, but we can also say that it's very recent. It's very recent in a way that it's less than 10 years that real investment is going through, because that's when it was privatized.
Right.
Now, you see that the majority of the financial institutions have limited information on that sector. They think that there's a high risk. Yes, there's risk, but the risk is as we see it in other sectors. Now, what we are trying to do with the Mining Association and with all the players in the industry is try to approach the banks, try to approach the financial institutions and tell them that this is one of the key sectors where you can put your money and benefit. However, those interest rates are really high. Right. And again, the guarantees which are asked are not aligned with the nature of the business. Now, we are putting in place an independent body of experts in mining and geology. Those who will help us assess the projects and then put up feasibility studies. So that feasibility study, we will do it with the Rwanda Bankers Association. So that whenever those experts validate a project, it complies with minimum requirements of the banks. So that the loan be guaranteed by the resources estimated within the deposit, rather than the assets of the mining company. Okay. This is something, it's not something we are inventing. It exists in other parts of the world. I can mention Australia, Canada, South Africa, those countries with a developed mining industry. They have a kind of standards reporting code. So now we are trying to bring in the Rwanda National Mineral Resources Reporting Code. And we believe with that one and with the collaboration of financial institutions, it can help resolve or reduce the burden which is being faced by the mining companies, as David said.
All right, we have some companies that have been mentioned. I'll circle back to that before we finish the first half of this panel discussion. Before we move away from the matters of finance, banks have been expressing a lot of reluctance in lending to miners and mining companies. How have we been addressing that from the Rwanda Mining Association point of view? Some of the projects are still not termed as bankable.
Let's a bit talk about the mining projects itself.
Right.
A mining project cannot just come and put it on the table. In terms of recognizing a mining deposit, there are many steps which involving reconnaissance of the ground to know exactly where the minerals, just to get an idea of where you can find the minerals and which mineral do you have to find. You have to define some heterogenic provinces. Some of these exploration techniques they need from satellite imagery up to geophone exploration. And these are very crucial, steps in defining a deposit. And in some of the countries, you've got companies just involved in exploration. If you're talking about oil industry, there's an exploration, a team or a company which is just dedicated to exploration. Right. And if we talk about Rwanda, you've got mostly two tungsten belts, the central tungsten belt, which is covering mostly the Nyakabingo mine. Then you go from the south to the north, you come to Gifurwe mine, which is now mined by Wolfram Mining and Processing. Then you go further into New Bugarama Mining. This is also another deposit which goes into the north. And then you come to Nyamuriro in Uganda. This tungsten belt pushes further into Uganda. Right. Then we've got western tungsten belt in Rwanda as well. That is in the area of Rutsiro. And it goes as well probably in North Kivu. Then that is about tungsten. Then we are talking about tin deposits. Tin deposits, we've got two major tin deposits. We've got one which is located in Rutongo that used to produce 2% of the world tin production in the 60s, 70s. And then we've got Rwinkwavu, which is also a good deposit of tin. But the major problem is those deposits have been mined during the colonial era. So at a certain stage, we had to update the resource. And this is what we've done for Rutongo project. And I don't know how far Rwinkwavu is developing the deposit, because in my point of view, artisanal mining is as good as dangerous, because you have to get enough knowledge to develop the deposit. Maybe what we call a small deposit, it's a major deposit. But because of the lack of knowledge of the deposits, we cannot really define a deposit as really small and put a full stop on it. Right. So it's a matter of exploration, push exploration. Exploration is a lot of money. Maybe it's not the money that the Rwandan banks could cover. Because remember, when you get your exploration right, you get the value of your deposit. If your bankable feasibility study certified by international, valuers, you take this study to the bank on London Stock Exchange, then you get the money to invest.
Right.
But how many projects now are reaching this step? It's not easy. You can make a study for 20 years, then you bring another geologist, another mining engineer, you bring another mineral economist, they go through, they check, they recheck, till you get your ticket for the London Stock Exchange to get the money. And till this is not has not happened, we still have an issue, but there is a hope. We can't say there is no more minerals. The minerals have been finished. Of course, minerals are not, it's not a renewable resource.
Right.
You have to explore. You have to make a good project, and then you have to put the project. Maybe you sell the project. Most of the exploration companies are just selling the project because I'm an explorer as a geologist, but I'm not a mining engineer, so I'm not mining. Or you sell it to a bank, I say this is how it's happening. Of course, the whole political will in the region, not only in Rwanda, all over, you need to get, because there are so many aspects of investment, of course. So right now on East Africa, we are trying to organize a task force in charge of exploration in the region, especially when you see the oil which has been discovered in Albertine, Rift Valley.
Right.
We think probably about some oil in Kivu Lake through the Rusizi Valley through Tanganyika Lake. This is something that will be explored by, Rwanda alone cannot just go and explore its lake, especially because it's sharing it with DRC. So it's a broad-based, some regional project which has to come in, just not confined to one country.
Right. Still on that train of thought, I have to reel you in, Honorable Minister. The foreign footprint in Rwanda. Now, he's mentioned that, and Sub-Saharan Africa has seen a lot of investments from outside coming in, which is particularly no exception for Rwanda. We have local investors who don't necessarily have the financial muscle that other macro players might have. China, for example, have knowledge on ground. He's mentioned it, but how much of a disruption does foreign investment continue to cause in the mining sector?
So we've continued to see foreign companies coming in, which is very good, but not at the pace we'd like to see them. Right. You remember that a few months ago, there were some agreements signed. For instance, I can mention an agreement signed on the former Bisesero concession and some mining perimeters within the former Gatumba. And we are finalizing on the 7 other former concessions like Nemba, like
right.
Rutsiro, and other ones. So those ones will be developed by local companies or Rwandese investors as well as foreign investors, which is very good.
Right.
So because we want both. We want foreign investment, we also want local investment. But now we need to not take it as a final thing.
Right.
It's just the beginning for us, because as those investors are coming in, they will relook at the exploration data we have today and move to more advanced exploration technologies to get to resource estimates. And for most of those projects, we have been giving them on average 3 years to come back with a report showing how much and what quality of, what quantity of mineral resources are contained in the deposits. And from there, we'll develop semi-industrial and industrial mines, which all of them need to partner with other private companies as well as the government so that we develop value addition locally.
Right.
We've seen some good development at one of the tin smelters, which is not far from Kigali. But we don't think is the end of it. It's just one project. We need more projects of that kind. We need value addition in the coltan, for instance. We need a separation, first of all, upgrading the tantalum and niobium, which is leaving the country. And as we move forward, we need to reach to a point where we can separate both. All of those will increase the money generated by our companies. And as money generated by the companies increases, we believe they will invest more in expanding their operations. And as they expand their operations, they also employ more people locally. They pay more taxes. That's what we think about the sector. And there are few projects we have in the pipeline.
Right.
And we believe by the end of this year, 2016, some of them would be at the pilot phase so that we can see tangible development by 2017.
All right, allow us to put a pause there. We'll be right back. We'll go for a short break. But we have the association within the quarry. We have the mining association. We have the geologists association that should be coming up to map out a projection for the sector. When we come back, we'll take a look at the mandate of each of this and how we're going to work around the challenges. We'll be right back with more right here on CNBC Africa. Hi, welcome back to CNBC Africa. We've been discussing the outlook of the mining sector here in Rwanda. We have had some interesting conversations within the first half. Now, to continue with the conversation, we have an elite panel. Evo Dimena, Honorable State Minister in charge of mining on my right. David Bensusan, CEO of Mineral Supplies Africa. Leonidas Simpenzwe, Vice Chairman of the Rwanda Mining Association and Senior Geologist of Tinko Group. Now, we left on that note regarding the different associations. We'd like to know their mandate and whether exactly there's an overlap. We have the Rwanda Mining Association, Rwanda Quarry Association. We have the Association of Geologists that you said will come on board, and we also intend to see a lot more coming on. Are we seeing at any point the responsibilities overlapping, or how exactly would you break this down?
Okay, what we believe we intend to achieve is to have a chamber of extractive industries. Mm-hmm. Today, we have the Mining Association, which is the older. They put together mining companies, mineral trading companies, and they try to make advocacy for them. They try to promote that sector, and they work in very good collaboration with the government. Last week, we brought together all these companies engaged in quarry. Right. For instance, you have the Rudiva clays, you have the East African granite, you have the cement factory, you have these other companies crushing stones, producing gravel, sand, different type of companies. So we brought them together to form the Rwanda Quarry Association. We expect to have that kind of association or group of experts in those business, bringing together geologists, mining engineers, metallurgists, and other scientists who are involved in the development of those sectors. Right. We maybe also dream of having a petroleum association, but the upstream petroleum, because today we have the downstream petroleum. Right. The distributors, those who are in the logistics of the petroleum, they have their association today. But as we are continuing in the exploration, we believe we may be able to discover some resources. And when we'll have that industry in place, we can have the upstream petroleum association. And then with the oil, with the mining, with the quarry, right, and with the experts, they can put together themselves and form the chamber of extractive industries. So at that level, we believe it will be a very strong partner with the government and with outside players to develop and bring more capacity in whatever we are doing today. Right. So they have different, maybe specific role, but their broad roles is to be a good partner with the government, to do advocacy for the members, and to do some research and promote and do marketing of whatever is happening in the country.
All right, and we'll be right there keeping track just to make sure we don't lose count of what's happening there. Now, David, Leonidas mentioned something about what has been happening, tracking through the gold sites and deposits and other minerals outside Rwanda. Now, we have that same issue in almost every sector. We try to create a lot of individualism, but we still need a regional front. We need to market our mining sector from an East African perspective, but we still need to market it from a Rwandan perspective. How do we achieve both, knowing we need to tap both finances, even contribute to the East African budget on the same? How do we work out that?
Well, that was one of the major themes that our president brought up. That East Africa's each country is going to move at its own pace. You're not going to force a country to move quicker. Rwanda, Uganda are ready to move. They're moving already to forming, and to quite a big degree, the Congo wants to be involved.
Right.
The industry needs to be intertwined together, need to work closely together, both in East Africa and the Congo. You can't work without all working together. There needs to be free movement of material, which is being looked into. Proper tax units, so taxes are paid when they're supposed to be paid, but are paid at stages. If you're importing, for instance, from Uganda to Rwanda, which is feasible, and the processing is being paid, the processing is being done in Rwanda, but not in Uganda, there should be a different form of taxation. So to enable inter-region trade, it's very important. I'm a trader, not a miner. I invest in mines. I do invest in mines. I've got, I think, over $8 million invested in mines already. All of them are producing. They're not producing at a level I want to see them produce. But it's why it's important that we have the East African community working as one. If we can get that together, we can challenge the world. We could even control prices. We produce sufficient material to be able to control. China controls tungsten. If China sneezes on tungsten, we all catch a cold.
Right.
Coltan is controlled by China and America. There's no market price for coltan. In tin, there's the LME. It's very good because no one person can control it. It is decided by demand. But with tantalum, it's controlled by the consumer. He pushes the price. We have no control. We would love to. Tin is easier because of the LME. But how do we control it? We produce within East Africa probably 60% of the world's tantalum. If we developed our mines properly, we could become one of the largest tin producers in the world. And we could make a say. If we can get a tin smelter working and working regularly, and then from the tin smelter is only the first stage. 80% of tin is used in solder. We have silver and gold. So silver and gold goes into solder making. We can produce what we're importing. And then you attract the manufacturing industry to come in because the raw material they want is in East Africa. That's added value. It's not one item. It's a development. And Africa's not doing it. We need to.
Right, you mentioned if we get a tin smelter. I think the wording you're looking for was when we get a tin smelter.
Okay, I'll use that word.
All right. And now let's talk about we'll come over to you for the balance between demand and supply. This is still unclear. We were talking earlier about demand. Now we're working out the balance between that. 30 international firms have currently set base in the country. We are seeing them inject more than 37 hundreds of thousands of dollars, employing over 40,000 employees with the potential to employ an additional 60,000. From where you sit, how is that relationship between the demand and supply? Are we overworking the ecosystem, or are we just moving at the perfect pace?
Thank you very much for this question. Maybe before I go to this one, I should make some comments about the regionalization of the industry.
Right.
You know, I've been a long time on what we call East African Community Mineral Expert Group, and then I've been also, currently I'm on an international conference on the Great Lakes region, audit committee, trying to address the issues relating to the traceability of the minerals in the region. And I do insist it is very important for all the countries involved in it to get this industry together, because Rwanda alone cannot stand the industry, because it has to be extended to the region. Talking about what David was saying about the smelter, we've been thinking on the East African group of experts on natural resources that we got some key development minerals for Africa, or East Africa in particular. And you see tin, which is really produced in in Rwanda, and Burundi as well.
Right.
Tin, tantalum, tungsten, those are the free teas we are talking about. And these free teas, if Tanzania is not moving too much on free teas, it's because we are not interested very much in free teas as we are interested. Because we've got much more gold, we have much more Tanzanite, we are much more interested in our product. But if you look the scheme of Rwanda and the DRC and Burundi, where this Kibaran orogeny has happened, we've got this Kibaran rocks, where this free teas belt is happening. This is really where we have to unite, to come together and see how we can uplift this kind of minerals development. And I still believe with all the countries, because now we are moving for Africa Mining Vision. And this is the meeting I will be attending from tomorrow in Kampala, because we try to make what we call an exploration task force. And Rwanda cannot be left behind that scheme. And the Africa Mining Vision has got, of course, a vision up to 2063. We have to achieve a lot in terms of mining and assessing the resources, because Africa is the richest, continent with resources at the moment, at our retro knowledge, but yet you've got the high poverty rate in the world, and this is very questionable. And during our last meeting in Kigali on Africa Mining Vision, we've seen that people have been much more talking about politics on the headquarters of African Union. If we never give enough time to the resources, and the time has come to give enough time to the African resources to develop. And in terms really, we should more even talk about Africa, because if I've got a container of tin, I have to take it in China. That tin, the container of tin, that is 25 tons, it's not smelted. So I have to smelt it. If I don't smelt it, I export my raw material to China, and Burundi is exporting the same, and Uganda is exporting the same. So we are exporting 30% impurities on this product. And this we cannot keep on. And if you go for a smelter, you've got a small refinery or a small smelter, it's not worth it to make a small smelter. You need huge volumes, you need electricity, you need all infrastructures involved. And this is why we are not competing with Malaysia Smelting Corporation. We are not competing with some Chinese giants, refineries on tungsten or on tantalum. So this is why we need something to uplift something, not only in Rwanda, but region-wide. This is what one of my thinking. Then coming back to your question about if we are really overworking on the ecosystems, I don't think we have a huge mining industry, because our deposits, most of the deposits are still really at embryonic stage. They are not really known very much. The type of machinery we are using are not really causing too much damage to the industry, because if you go to China, you see what a real mining industry is, a real quarry is, a real machinery which is using in the mining sector. You can see that either they are destroying environment, or how much refined product they are refining, how many tons. And here it's just still a fresh, mining system that we are trying to develop. But we need to know the deposit. That is very, very important, to know the deposit, to know the extent, and then to see the method, to set up the mining method. And then this is where the ecosystem issue will come. Because now it's just some small operations, small-scale operations. A small-scale miner is conducting small-scale operation. Right. So a small-scale operation cannot harm too much to the ecosystem. Right. But Rwanda, the problem you've got, it's a hilly land. It's 1,000 hills land, so country. So you've got problem of erosion, which have been always attributed to the miners. Right. In my view, which is not really right. But this is not, it's something we can control, something we control at the moment.
Let's bring in the Honorable Minister for this. Of course, he's mentioned something which I was to jump in, which is Africa continues to be named as the richest continent, but still the poorest continent, particularly because we're still not clear about revenue management and a lot of politicking that he's mentioned. But from your end, establishing clear rules and guidelines to enhance Rwanda's capacities to administer tax policies, one of the issues has been, while incentivizing the macro players, tax exemptions, the local players feel like they are left out or sidelined. But just help us clear this.
You know, development is a process. It never ends. But you have steps. For the mining industry in our country, we are almost closing the first step, which was the period of 10 years, 2006 to 2016. It was more of bringing more confidence in investors that there's the possibility of establishing a mining industry in the country.
Right.
So at that time, the government privatized all operations, and we saw investors like the ones who are here injecting some money in the mines and establishing a trading chain. So now we need to take the next step, which will be to close the gap in knowledge. There's a gap on knowledge on the resources. What do we have? Where are these resources located? We need to delineate deposits and estimate reserves.
Right.
But as we close that gap, we also need to close the second gap on the skills, the one you've been mentioning.
Right.
We need to have geologists, mining engineers, mineral economists, people specialized in mineral trading, so that we move together forward. And now, that second phase needs also to go with the very good point made by David on closing the gap on the value chain. We don't think smelting will be the end point. It actually should be the starting point. You know, tin is used in soldering and in most of these equipments we have in this room.
Right.
When our smelters will start producing 100% pure tin, why should we just export it as 100% pure tin? Why can't we move forward with using it locally? You know, we have currently an industry assembling computers. As that factory will grow and other business will come around that factory, we believe we'll be able, with our mining companies, mineral processing companies, be able to supply them with soldering material from the tin produced locally. An easiest example is on the quarry site, because it's used in the construction industry. Today, most of the tiles used in big infrastructure projects, the granite tiles are sourced from Rwanda. You've seen also paving. They're doing some very good pavements of hard granite cobblestones to build our roads. Why can't we now take the next step and start manufacturing glass? We have recently evaluated a deposit in Kirehe district with more than 5 billion tons of silica sand. Now, what we need is to partner with serious private companies and establish even PPPs and develop those projects. It will touch on various areas of the economy, and mining industry, quarrying industry will be able to supply them with ceramics because we have good kaolin.
Right.
With bricks and tiles, we have good clay. With the gold, we are still importing jewels. But you know, gold which is produced locally and gold which is produced from the region can be brought in Rwanda and then developed into very good, nice jewels. We have gemstones. Now we are working with private companies to see how we can establish a cutting and polishing center. You know, there's those centers which are called agakiriro, where you see youth, women brought together, working on small scale and small and medium enterprises. We believe this can be a very good point for the development of the gemstone industry. Because today, actually for the last 3 years, we've seen a growth of more than 15% in the gemstone business. So, but now we're asking ourselves, but can we continue just watching it like this? Or can't we take another step and close the gap on the value chain?
Who exactly brings the players? Isn't it them to line up the players within the value addition system?
They're here.
It's not.
Why are
it's
we
not.
seeing that gap?
No, the gap isn't there. The gap is there.
Yeah.
But the gap is false. It's not a real gap. It's just a question. We're going back to finance to build a soda company. To build, it's got to be profitable. Someone's got to come in and see a profit. Otherwise, they won't. Investors don't give their money. Governments give money. It's a fact. They have a long-term view of developing a country. But an investor wants to see a return. If he can't see a return, he doesn't invest. It's up to government to attract the investor. It's up to the media. You've got a strong point here.
Right.
As a media. Media caused OECD and the Dodd-Frank legislation. It was down to media.
Right.
They started with a lie, and it became the truth. And the lie affected millions of people all over East Africa and the Congo. Media can play a major part. Tell them how. Tell them about Rwanda. Rwanda's unbelievable. This vision that the president had of the conference center, nobody believed it would work. But it was brilliant. And it's going to bring more people to see an African country where you can walk the streets at night. You're safe. You can invest safely. People are not going to con you. There's no bribery at all. I've been here nearly 20 years. I've never paid a bribe, ever. And that's one big statement in Africa. And I've been here a long time. This is what's required. It requires media, the government, to sell what we have here and what we can have in East Africa. There is the ability. What Rwanda has become in 22 years, Africa can become.
Right. Leonis, why are we, apart from what has been mentioned, that was actually very powerful, but apart from that, why are we not seeing more players being added on, from your part being played?
Mining is a long-term project. It's not a small, a 5-year project, you know. It's a long-term project. Let's face it. If you see let's say Bugesera Airport. This airport has been talked about since I was born. In 1972, they took elephants from Bugesera, saying Americans are going to build the airport in Bugesera. But now we are in 2016. From 1972, this Bugesera airport now can see the day. So mining is the same. You cannot just come in a country and today and tomorrow you get of course, your investment card from RDB, and then you get your excavator and you start excavating because you don't know where you excavate, as I said. So we have to start from somewhere. And most of the projects, as I said earlier, you need an exploration team, which you put a project up to a bankable feasibility study. Then you get this list of bankable projects. Once an investor comes in, then he knows exactly where to stick. But once you don't have this kind of project, which we cannot blame the government that it has not done it, or the private sector that they've not done it. It's a process, and it's the process into which we are sitting. As David mentioned, as far as the political conditions, political will, and no bribery, no corruption, nothing, is on the ground. You've got enough room to operate. We've got a hope that these things will happen. Right. But it couldn't just happen. This is why we've got these associations, Rwanda Mining Association, Rwanda Geologist Association, we've got Rwanda Quarrying Association. All these people, we have to put their heads together and say, look, we know we've got a tungsten deposit. Where should be like the tungsten deposit we've got? Now, free miners are known from that deposit. From my colleague, we've investigated by our little knowledge. There are probably 2 more deposits of tungsten which are hidden on the north central tungsten belt, especially between Nyakabingo and Gifurwe. But those deposits are buried somewhere. And we need a deeper technology, a very, very high technology to get the target. Yeah. But this is somehow an international cooperation. You cannot just sit as a geologist with your compass, say, myself, I'm going to isolate a deposit. It's not possible. It's
not possible. Still back on the topic of what exactly we anticipate. Now we'll come back. There's still a lot of comfort we're seeing in our projections and more. We'll come back to see what is lacking because we haven't had that yet. We've had the conversation about what projections we had last year, but we were hardly hit globally. Now we anticipate the same. Of course, things have eased up for this particular year. We still continue to see a more robust system. But if we know that we are going to be hit again, What are we doing with our reserves to ensure that we can cushion ourselves in the event that that happens?
Okay. First of all, let's expect that we are not going to be hit again.
Right.
But as a government, what we need to put in place is a resilience mechanism. And resilience mechanism comes from various sides and will be supported by different pillars. Pillar number one is to have value addition locally. Because you see, and that's what we've been discussing, the price of commodity decreased, but the price of finished product didn't decrease. The price of solder didn't decrease, but the price of tin decreased. Now, as we grow as a country and as we increase our capacity to produce finished products, we'll be more resilient.
Right.
Pillar number two is diversification. Yes, the three T's, tin, tungsten, tantalum, were hit. And most of other metal commodities, and even beyond metal commodities. We saw it in oil, we saw it in agriculture, in elsewhere. But as you diversify, maybe with more production on construction materials, finished construction products, tiles, other ceramics, jewels, decorative products, all of those can help you in difficult periods like the one we are living in.
Right.
So we are looking it broadly. Tin, tungsten, and tantalum will continue to be the core of the Rwanda mining industry because those are the major deposits we have locally. But now we are seeing other commodities coming in. We see gemstones, we see gold, and we see also rare earth elements, for instance. But apart from those major elements which are brought in by the nature of the geology we have, we also want to put an emphasis on other commodities like vermiculite. That is something which is used in agriculture, which is used in isolating, insulation, and in other various day-to-day life. We've discovered vermiculite in southwest Rwanda.
Right.
We have not yet started benefiting from that discovery, but we are attracting people to come and invest their money. Partner with the government. The government will continue play its role in closing the gap of exploration data. We continue producing good primary geology data which can serve as a basis for companies to come, finalize on exploration, or even the government would even move on and complete exploration and then put forward the data so that investors from the private sector can come and build industries. So those are areas we think, because we have already the foundation, David mentioned them, due to the very good leadership from our president, we have the very good foundations. Now we have something to build from. And to build from that, we need to continue working together with the private sector.
All right. We have just two more questions for both, and then we'll come back for a parting shot with you. 103 million 2015, 209, of course, hardly hit 2016, boiling over January to August. We're projecting 400 million by 2018. Given all this that we've tackled, sector by sector, prioritization of what needs to be done, how feasible is that number?
If I knew that, I wouldn't be working. I'd be retired a long time ago. But to give you an answer as best I can, the markets are moving. Tin is now at $20,000 plus. It was at 13 as low. And that's the damage that was done. So you've now got a $20,000 tin. So the production of tin will grow. The artisanal miner and the semi-industrial mining that the government is pushing will increase production. So you will reach a higher level. There is the other issue, which you've not made a thing of. Our competition doesn't have Dodd-Franks to deal with. It's hugely expensive.
Right.
There are countries outside of our region, Congo and East Africa that are not affected, and they're producers. These people have an advantage, a huge advantage. First of all, the world is open to them to sell. East Africa and the Congo can't sell to the world. We have brick walls in our way. We have to follow due diligence, which costs a fortune. And I told you, we, that is Africa, pays 82% of that cost, which was forced on us by the American Congress, and then backed up by the European and the OECD. We are at a disadvantage. That's a huge amount of money. It's 8-9% in money that is being spent, and constantly. I won't mention names of companies, but I sell coltan, quite a lot of it. I'm probably the largest exporter of coltan in the country. I sell to major consumers. The major consumers stock it. They don't use it immediately. They take it in as stock. They hold it. I got a call from a major smelter who was processing the material for the major consumer. 2 years ago, I shipped the material, but we had to have information tracing every ounce of 24,000 kilos of material back to a clean mine, which is controlled by GMD, the government body, and ITRI and OECD. We had to do that. We had to have the technology to cover the questions that were answered. And to go back 2 years, sometimes the deliveries are only 100 kilos. There could be 300 to 400 lots in there from different mine sites. And we had to do it. This is the cost that East Africa and the Congo have to deal with, which our competitors don't. And it's huge. And it needs East Africa and the Congo must get together and challenge this. They brought it in with a good reason. It wasn't a bad reason.
Right.
There was a war from 97 to 2004, and people were dying. Not the numbers, anywhere near the numbers that was used. But now we've controlled it. Rwanda doesn't have soldiers or mines. We don't put children down mines. There are not massive rapes going on in Rwanda. We're clean. The legislation was a one-fit-all legislation. It's got to change. ICGLR, which Leonardus is on and does a lot of work for. ICGLR can do the job that OECD and ITRI are doing. Why are we not trusted? Why isn't Rwanda trusted to do this job? Why do we have to go through Dodd-Franks, through OECD, now through Europe? Why? What's wrong with Africa? We're okay now. We've got a good establishment. Let ICGLR take care of the traceability and let it be enough. Why should we pay everybody else? And the end user doesn't pay. It's us. It's Africa that's paying to prove we're better.
Right.
And that we're good, but the rest of people don't.
Over to you. He's
Just to
placed a lot
back
on
him up on what
right.
he has been saying, you see, to achieve 400 million US dollars on production, this should not be a big deal in case all the miners are organized, the sector is organized, and so on and so forth. We got investment coming in. It shouldn't be really a problem. But the problem is relying to the challenges, especially how do you get the market, your market right? The competition is huge in the industry of free teas. When this law, Dodd-Frank Act, came into force in 2010, there was a big discussion about it. How, of course, if you go back to UN Security Council, we were saying we've investigated and we found out the minerals mined in the region here, Rwanda, Burundi, DRC, were contributing to the finance of armed groups. And this is how they went and they brought Dodd-Frank Act just to try to cope with the illegal exploitation of natural resources in the region. The issue had been, if you go in DRC, you've got 2 million people just busy with artisanal mining. It's what they do. It's like if you go to Tanzania, you've got probably a huge number of people involved in artisanal gold. If you go in Angola, you've got plenty of people involved in artisanal diamonds. In Zimbabwe, it's the same. So considering a huge number of people involved in this industry, and considering that just pushing an embargo on Rwanda, on DRC, because the law talks about DRC and 11 adjoining countries that have to abide by Dodd-Frank Act. Right. But first of all, things have changed since 2000, let's say 2000, year 2000, let's say 2002, 2003, 2000, what? The war is no longer in DRC like it used to be. The evolution, the time have been changed. And the law is still there, and it's striking a lot of people because the mining industry in the region here cannot compete. We are not only talking about Rwanda, we are talking about DRC, we are talking about Southern Uganda, we are talking about Western Tanzania, the Kagera province. They cannot mine the fleets, especially because they say, how do we find the market? Especially they don't have the tags. Right. And to get registered to the tags and to convince people to buy your material, it's a problem. While the guy who is mining in Burma, that is in Southeastern Asia and Tin Belt,
has it a lot easier.
He has no charges on traceability. Yeah. If I have to invest in Burma, there is no problem. The confidence is 100% because nobody will, stop me from selling my material. Okay. While investor is coming in the region here, is saying, no. The product from that region, the embargo is pending on that region, please. Right. And the traceability fees are a lot. You better move it to another region. This is why I said from the beginning that we have to defend the industry as an entire region, not as a single country.
All right, let's leave some for Honorable Minister. Now, we are done with this, but you have to give us your parting shot. We've had very valid points, and we can't focus on the mining sector as an income generator only. We have to first create an ecosystem that maintains mid to long term. Now, given all that's been mentioned, how do we work out that? We have a lot of adversity, global level, national level. How do we work it out? You have a lot on your plate.
Yes. Let's say that there are also very good positive developments we are seeing. You heard that recently the government decided to take 10% of the revenue from mining taxes and dedicate that 10% to the development of communities living around mine sites. That is a sign that we are confident on what is going on, and we want that wealth which is being generated benefit all the citizens, and in particular those who are close to mine sites. Right. But okay, to what my colleagues here talked about, 6 years ago, legislators from a country outside Africa sat down, basing on emotions, voted a law which has huge implications on the development of the mining industry within our region. We've been talking about this at various summits, various conferences, but looking at it, you find that those laws are benefiting some groups and they are hampering the development of what we're talking about. We believe that in the future people will understand that there's no reason to just sit down and vote something claiming that you want to secure the development of those you are voting for, whereas you are just stopping them to advance. So those laws, those regulations are hampering and are consuming a lot of our time and a lot of our efforts. But they won't stop us. We will continue, and it's about the issue, the Twitter discussions we've been discussing. We are confident that we have resources here. Now we have institutional framework. We have a policy which is currently being reviewed. We have legal framework which is also being amended, modernized, because our laws have to continue keeping the pace of the development of the sector, because they are there to support the development. We can't afford having our laws hampering the development of the sector.
Right.
So whenever it will be important to review the mining laws, mining regulations, in collaboration with the players in the industry, we will do so. Now, the media, you will play a lot to market the region, to market Rwanda as an important investment destination for the mining sector, and to attract people to know that there's something going on, everything is transparent, everything is clear, every exports are certified, you can trace them, but we need to avoid putting a lot of burden on our small private sector,
right,
which is trying to develop.
Okay.
So in short, people, they are the most welcome. We want them to come and work with us, and we have a lot to do in these coming 10, 50, 100 years.
All right. We absolutely appreciate that, and we have a lot more conversations to carry on. We seem to see a lot of that misconstrued, but we really do appreciate all the insight, trying to help us understand the outlook on the mining sector. Thank you, Honorable Minister Evode Mena, State Minister in charge of mining. We appreciate your feedback on the same. We will be talking soon. I anticipate that. David Bensusan, CEO of Mineral Suppliers Africa, I appreciate your insight. And Leonidas Simpenzwe, Vice Chairman of Rwanda Mining Association, Senior Geologist. We anticipate when the association comes to, we will be talking to you as well after a while. Tinko Group, we thank you very much for that. That's where we leave it for this panel session. It's been 1 hour, but we feel like we've spoken for just 15 minutes. There's a lot more to cover within the mining sector, but of course, CNBC Africa will be eyes and ears on ground, trying to get sense of how exactly the country and the continent is progressing on the very same. I've been your host, George Ndurango. Thank you for watching our debate on the mining industry. Keep it CNBC Africa, first in business worldwide.